quite busy on this car recently. So, to bring you up to date, I've made this cowling and fitted the thermo fan, and it's got a thermostat control. That I already made a video about that. This parking light here was intermittent, and there's, well, I can't really see it well on this side, but over here there are these distribution boards. Actually, you can probably see it better over there from this side, that are just a terminal strip. Here it's made out of that sort of well, no, it's not a Bakelite, it's like a resin board with a fibre in it, and this is the original board, I'd say, when the car was made. So it's 90 years old. I re-drilled and tapped all of the threads in there. So I have rewired all through here. There's a new wire running down this side. I've taped up the loom, and I did a complete rebuild inside of this Parker. That was a bit of a mess, and I've completely redone that. And then this door would always, it was very hard to close. And there's this ratchet plate here that locks in, the lock goes onto, and these screws were loose, and it didn't matter what you did, tighten them. They're screwing a 90-year-old timber behind here, and every time you tighten them, they never really tighten, and then they come loose again. So I'm in a hurry just to get to a car meet that I just want to go for lunch with the guys. I knocked in some dowels into these holes with glue, wood glue, then re-screwed them, and it is really nice and tight now. And the door just shuts easy. I gave the engine a degrease. I changed this gasket here. It's still leaking a little bit, but that gasket underneath where the thermostat is was absolutely terrible. It's still leaking a tiny bit with my new gasket, but it's not bad. And then while I was at it, I thought, well, I'll have a look at the timing again, engine timing, and I thought, well, I'll disconnect the vacuum advance line to make sure that I get initial timing without vacuum advance on. And then I had the vacuum line, well, there was a vacuum line attached to here, and it just dropped down here into the, and there was a bolt in the end of it. So quite a few years ago now, I replaced this electronic ignition module and the distributor. They're a new pair together, and while I was doing that, I must have disconnected the vacuum advance to set the initial timing and never put it back on again. So I hooked it up in here. It hooks up onto the, obviously onto the distributor there, and the line was hooked onto this port here, which is on the base of the carburettor. So it looked like, to me, it would be manifold vacuum. But then I've got a little vacuum gauge and pump. It allows you to bleed your brakes as well. Nice little handy thing. And I hooked it onto this port, and this had no vacuum at idle, and as you rev, it would bring back vacuum on, which is the opposite of what you want for vacuum advance. So I looked at this port, and it was the same. So I've got a book on Holley carburettors. It's got a manual on all these different, it's a fairly complete thing, exploded diagrams, and I couldn't figure it out. Anyway, I then tried it onto this port down here, and it didn't work. So at the end of it all, there is this port here, which is really made for, the larger port, really made for coming out the front of the carby, the vacuum boost for the brakes, but the vacuum for the brakes comes off this line here, off the manifold, so that was free. And so I've got this line that runs along here, and I had to adapt it down to the 5/16 to go onto the vacuum advance, so that this line here is pushed up inside of this line. And I timed it again using the vacuum advance. I took it for a drive, and it has made the car just idles better. It seems to be running a bit cooler, which is what is apparently to be expected. So all of these things are starting to come together. I do have a bit of an exhaust leak coming back in on the I'm not sure which side of this. I might have to pull the manifold off and check that again. So, but anyway, with all of those things done, I'm now starting to look at things that just bothered me forever, but I've never done anything about. And that's like this door here. You see that it sits out from the car, and if you look at the line down the side here, this has got to be, you know, it's got to be 10 mil, 3/8 of an inch too low. So I open this up, and here are the hinges, and there's been one replaced screw when this was all rebuilt with a bugle bolt, but these ones here, if I lift the door, this whole hinge, if I can get it where you see it, is coming way out. And you look over here, the gap at the front here, that's a big gap here, but if I just lift it, I get this straight away. And if I look at this body line, it's not perfect, but if I close the door with it, well, if I look down here and we see where that door latch is locking onto this this ratchet plate, it is right down at the bottom of it. So if we look at this body line here, you can see that there's probably, it's maybe a centimetre low. And if we look at the line of the gap at the top of the door, it's very out there, but then I can just lift the door. And if we come in and look at that gap now, as I'm doing that, and if we look down here on this hinge and look in from the side, you see that hinge is completely loose. Thickens. I tightened up those screws and they tighten up reasonably well, but then it was still hanging low, and then I noticed that there's this plate that meets a striker on the door. So we got this on the door, which is nice and tight, and then we got this on the, well, the pillar, and I look at this and it's loose, and also I look at that looks very, very worn. So I think that what we do is we take this plate off and have a look at it and see, yeah, that bottom screw is doing nothing. So this is loose, but I think the bigger problem is this. You look at that, I'd say that's meant to go about like this, and it's, so what's the difference? If I line, hang on, I'll get my 6-inch rule, and just line that up like that, I'd say that there's potentially 6 mil, 7 mil. That's low. Alright, so let's have a look at that. Well, looking at this, there's not much timber left for those screws. Hang on. That's completely chewed out, and this one, I think they're both the same size screw, but you can see that one, there's nothing much. And there was a screw in the side here, smaller screw, and that seems to miss the timber entirely, and it's going into, well, no, that's timber there as well, but there's a separate piece of timber. So none of those are where they should be. And then we have this, which is not quite what I expected. So I think I have to go down to a workshop and investigate what's going on here. These are the two plates from the other side. I mean, plates from both sides of the front door. And it occurred to me they're both the same, and they're worn on the opposite side. So this is the one from the passenger side, this is one from the driver's side. But if I switch them, you can see the passenger side one here is badly worn along here on that face, whereas the driver's side, unsurprisingly, is not nearly as badly worn. It's not perfect, but it isn't nearly as badly worn. And then if we look at this side, this is the driver's side, terrible. And the passenger side, that face is effectively as new. So if I just switch them from one side to the other, we'll get a new bite. So if this has taken 90 years of the car being in presumably much more common use, and you can see the difference. The passenger side has not been open and shut anywhere near as much, so the wear on that plate is less than the wear on this plate. Expression opening a can of worms comes to mind right now. So I opened up these latches, or whatever you'd call them, and this is the mess that came out. We've got all these bits and pieces. I was thinking maybe it was this could be metal and I might be able to weld it up. I build it up with weld, but it's all just, I think it might be Bakelite. Fortunately, so there was all these springs in here. You got 2 springs on each side. Like that. And then there was 4 of these. This is the least worn of all of them and the least broken, although I have super glued this back together. And so the springs go inside of these holes, if I could get it to fit. Yeah, so they go in there, and this sits in here, and seems to be that they push up against this center plate, and so as the door comes in, there's supposed to be this small amount of movement. Well, of course, these were completely stuck. This has been a bit of a fun ride. So, pull these all apart. I got this material and machined them up and drilled these holes, and these springs I was hoping to reuse them, but they were not up to it. These springs are not as strong. You can see that they're way finer wire, but you can put these in and they will compress all the way down, so that's all good. What isn't good is that this is the actual piece from the door, and if you look closely, the undercut that I machined here, I put on the wrong side. So that should have been the top. This undercut goes on the top. So what have I done? I've spent the morning machining a new set, and this time, yeah, it's taken me hours to get back to where I was. Still not quite there. I need to drill those holes, and then I can put it in and machine these on the correct, these undercuts on the correct side. I did have another one that I cut left over. I machined the last lot out of some round that I had, and I didn't have it enough, and there, out of this stuff. So I cut the end off this, and have had to machine quite a bit out to get them down to size. So now I will set these up, drill the holes, and machine the undercuts on the correct side. It's back together. We now have, so you can see that this raised section that's pushed in here holds the pieces in place. Got the springs in. That was a bit of a job. I ended up putting it into the vise with a piece, clamping it like that so it held everything where it should be. But if these are meant to be tight, there isn't spring lock, so it can, there's not, the spring coils aren't locking, sorry, the spring coils aren't locking, so it can actually move, and we want it to be very tight because that's supposed to support quite a bit of weight. So I should now be able to put this all back together again. There they are. So just tack welded where I cut that away. It's not the prettiest tack weld I've ever done, but it seems to be holding. And it's going to go inside the car. So there's the, there they are. I'll give them a little bit of paint, and then we can screw them onto the car. These back in. There's a new dowel in behind this and on the other side, and you can see I've already been opening and closing the door a bit. So here's the way it looks now. I'd say this is going to wear again, but it's way better than it was. So I get focus. It's way better than it was. But then this is the next thing to be working on. This is the next thing to be working on. The fact that hinges loose. And also I pulled this off already once. You can't probably see very well, but there's a screw here that's pulling out. There's a couple, there was a couple of mounts. This plate for the latch goes back, kind of back to about here somewhere. And I've got two stainless steel countersink screws in here now. And this is obviously not holding it in position. And there is probably a 5mm gap here. So I need to rework all of that. But this is actually helping quite a bit. So there is still a gap at the bottom, and if I push in on that door, it comes in a lot better. And when I do this, you see that when I push it in, this door lifts, and that's that latch. That's that bit that I just rebuilt. As that pushes in, it's lifting it. So I think if I got this so it's sitting where it should be, and then this is a little loose too, so I did the other side, take these screws out, and maybe I shouldn't have to, but maybe if I move that striker plate 5mm that way, if I redowel it, I might be able to do that. But these were quite a job. The other side's really nice. But that is better than it was. And when I push it in, you can see it lifting the door as it goes into that. So if I can get that to sit like that, that will be not perfect, but it'll be way better than, even now it's better than it was. I think that's not quite, yeah, that's coming out further than it was. But, well, that's a job for another day. But that day's probably not very far away. I'll try and get all of that right on the hinge, and get all of this sitting where it should, and getting this striker plate set up where it needs to be. And then if it holds it like that, the body line's not perfect, but it's a lot better than that. It's a little out at the bottom, but it's not terrible. That's my aim. Anyway, that's one job at a time. If we just do one job at a time, eventually we'll get through the jobs. All right, that'll do for this time.